Today we are solving equations using the square root method. So we're still getting x by itself like we've done all year long. Now you're just going to have an x squared in the equation. So starting with x squared equals 81, the opposite of squaring something is to square root it. So if you square root the left side, you also have to square root the right side to keep it even. The square root of 81 is 9. So we know x equals 9, but we're actually going to add one more thing to our answer. 9 squared equals 81, but there's also another number squared that will equal 81, and that's negative 9. Negative 9 times negative 9 is positive 81. So for our answer, we're actually going to write plus or minus 9 because positive 9 will work for our answer and negative 9 will work for our answer. So today, remember, every time you take the square root to put plus or minus in front of your answer. The next one we're going to solve is x squared equals 50, and this is bringing in what we did last class with simplifying square roots into our answer. To get x by itself, we're going to square root both sides, and I cannot take the square root of 50, but we know how to simplify this. The biggest perfect square that will go into 50 is 25, and 25 times 2 is 50. Well, the square root of 25 is 5, so I have a pair of 5s with a 2 left over. This is how you're going to write your final answer. If x is plus or minus the square root of 50, then that's going to simplify to plus or minus 5 square root 2. Remember, couples go out, what's left stays underneath. Now we're going to bring in a one-step equation with our simplifying square roots. So before you take the square root of both sides, you have to get m squared by itself. So we need to move plus 5 to the other side. The opposite of adding 5 is to subtract 5. And that leaves us with m squared equals 100. Now I'm ready to square root both sides. And the square root of 100 is 10, but don't forget plus or minus. I could plug in and check this by plugging my answer in for m. m squared plus 5 equals 105. Well, 10 squared is 100, and 100 plus 5 is equal to 105. That works for the positive 10. If I did the same thing with negative 10, I would also get 100 plus 5 equals 105. So it's true for both. Be careful if you're plugging in negative 10 squared into your calculator, make sure you put parentheses around it. Try this problem, pause the video, and then we'll check it together. Your first step for getting m squared by itself is to add 9 to both sides. When you do that, you're left with m squared equals 40. Now to get m by itself, we're going to square root both sides. You cannot take the square root of 40, but you can simplify it. The biggest perfect square that will go into 40 is 4. 4 times 10. And the square root of 4 is 2. So this simplifies to plus or minus 2 square root 10. If you try to break down 10, you get 2 and 5, so you're not going to get a pair. The 10 is going to stay underneath the square root. You can actually check this in your calculator too. If you want to type this in, you could plug in 2 square root 10 squared minus 9 equals 31, and the calculator will tell you that this is true. Go ahead and pause the video, try this problem, and then we'll check it together. Your first step for getting m squared by itself is to move over the 3 in front. Since that is 3 times m squared, the opposite is to divide it. So m squared is equivalent to 3 divided by 3, which is 1. Now we're ready to square root both sides, and we know that the square root of 1 is 1. Don't forget plus or minus in front. Now we're ready to try two-step equations with an exponent of 2. Your first step is to get m squared by itself, just like we've been doing. So first we've got to move plus 1 to the other side. The opposite of adding 1 is to subtract 1. And this becomes 2m squared equals 18. Now it's time to get rid of the 2. Since that's 2 times m squared, we're going to divide it on both sides. And we're left with m squared equals 9. Now, this is not your final answer. Remember, we want m completely alone. So my final step is to square root both sides. And the square root of 9 is plus or minus 3. If you want to check this in the calculator, you have to check it with both answers. First, you would plug in positive 3, and the calculator will tell you if it's true or false. Then you would have to plug in negative 3. Don't forget the parentheses when you type that in. Go ahead and pause the video and try this problem on your own, and then we'll check it together. The first step on this problem to get m squared by itself is to move the minus 5 to the other side. The opposite of subtracting 5 is to add 5 on both sides. From here, you're left with 4m squared equals 80. Now I have to move the 4 to the other side. Since that's 4 times m squared, the opposite is to divide 4 on both sides. And we're left with m squared equals 20. Well, if I square root both sides here, I get plus or minus square root 20. I can't take the square root of 20, but I can simplify it. The biggest perfect square that goes into 20 is 4, and 4 times 5 equals 20. The square root of 4 is 2, so I have a pair of 2's with a 5 left over. Your final answer for this problem is plus or minus 2 square root 5. You can check this in the calculator. All you would need to do is type in 4 parentheses 2 square root 5 squared minus 5 equals 75, and it will tell you that that is true. You could also check it with the negative answer by plugging in negative 2 square root 5. And now you're done solving quadratics using the square root method.